Okay, well, welcome everybody. Thank you all for being here today. My name is Stacy Matrazo. I'm the Executive Director of the Florida Wildflower Foundation, and I'm joined today by Drs. Gage LaPierre and Michael Andrew of the University of Florida. And we are excited to be here today to introduce the Florida Native Seed Partnership to you. This is a collaborative effort to build a sustainable, resilient, and profitable native seed system for our state. The foundation, our organization, and the University of Florida have been working on this initiative for the past couple of years, and we are eager to share the progress that we've made. We're now at a critical point. Florida's demand for native seed is growing rapidly, but our ability to supply that need has not kept up. So without action, we risk losing opportunities to restore habitat, support pollinators, excuse me, and strengthen biodiversity. At the same time, we have a unique opportunity to build a native seed system that works for land managers and growers and researchers and communities. So that's why today's conversation is so important and why your involvement is essential to what happens next. So with that, I will hand it over to Gage to get us, excuse me, get us started.
Sorry. All right. So thank you, Stacy. So just to jump right into it, I want to start with the question why we're all here today. And I think the driving force of this question is the need for seed that we all share. And so as it stands right now, the supply of native seed produced in Florida is growing, but it's still not sufficient to meet the rapidly growing demand. And there are substantial production, investment, and regulatory issues that limit its growth in supply, several of which I'll go into detail more in a moment. But as a result, the prices on many key species are at all-time highs, and many of us are frequently left with too little seed to conduct our projects. Collaboration, we believe, is the only way to alleviate these issues. But first, let's better understand these issues. And to do so, let's first look at demand and supply. Where is the need for demand coming from? Well, it's coming from several different sectors or industries. The first, most obvious demand driver is coming from all of our collective restoration efforts going on throughout the state. So there are public land agencies, private companies, etc. But public land agencies are the larger sources of these efforts for direct seeding as well as plug plantings derived from seed. At large scales, as we all know, that direct seeding is the most cost-effective means at achieving restoration goals. But again, we are greatly hindered in the ability to do these projects by the limited supply and cost of seed. The need for seed for restoration is only growing as more degraded land is being purchased in Florida for conservation as part of multiple wildlife corridor initiatives. The second source and closely related source of demand is the mitigation industry. So Florida currently has around 131 mitigation banks. These include wetlands as well as upland sites. The number of mitigation banks are expected to multiply in the coming years as a result of increasing population and urbanization trends in Florida. And this is driving the need for additional mitigation banks. Many of those that manage these mitigation banks desire large quantities of seed for projects on demand. However, the supply and availability of key species, again, it limits the effectiveness of this industry for producing higher quality sites at scale. The last large source of native seed comes from a lack of better words, the green industry. And so this includes projects like the creation of wildflower stands along roadsides by government agencies like Florida FDOT, the use of native ground cover species in solar farms and power line corridors for energy companies, the installation of meadow or novel plant communities in urban and rural areas for pollinator habitat, the use of native vegetation on degraded cattle ranges, or timberlands for enhanced wildlife benefits, as well as the use of native species in traditional landscaping and green infrastructure. All of these types of projects are sources of demand for native seed, but are unfortunately limited by a lack of supply. So what is causing this lack of supply? Well, to explain this properly, let's look at the two sources of supply for native seed in Florida. The first is from wildland seed harvesting. Practically all of the seed that is put out on the ground for purposes of restoration in Florida come from remnant populations on public lands, which make up around 1/3 of the state. Many of these species harvested, we do not yet know how to grow at profit in a farm production setting, making these the only sources of material available. So in other words, if wildland seed harvesting ceased, we would be lacking several key species. There have been several examples of small regional partnerships for sharing seed between agencies from wildland seed harvesting with great success. However, this has remained at a relatively small scale at the state level. And so why hasn't wildland seed or why isn't wildland seed meeting our demand for native seed? Well, there are several issues. The first of which are bureaucratic issues. Most public landholding agencies, for example, don't readily allow wildland seed harvesting for private use or for profit, which makes sense. Coupled with this issue and making it even more difficult for public land agencies is the fact that there is no certification process that exists for managing companies or groups for harvesting seeds on public lands. Additionally, there are a limited number of experienced groups and companies capable of harvesting seed at scale efficiently. And lastly, there is little research concerning the potential impacts of harvesting on plant communities. Um, and this is still something that remains to be further conducted. The second supply source for native seed are farm production plots, where native seed is produced at scale, typically in monoculture rows. Outside of Florida, there are several companies that have grown to large scales, supplying seed at regional levels. These companies frequently consist of several farms scattered across given regions. Some examples of these include Ernst in Pennsylvania, Bamert in Texas, Aladdin in Iowa, and the Native Seed Group that serves the west coast of the country. And there are other companies as well. Now, in Florida, there are around 8 small-scale farmers producing native seed within the state. This includes Southern Habitats and the Florida Wildflower Cooperative, which the latter formed around 20 years ago and helped pioneer several methods for producing seed in Florida, and has also proven to be a valuable source of knowledge and information for new farmers getting into this industry. Collectively, all of the native seed farmers in the state grow around an estimated 1,500 pounds of seed, which, while this number again is increasing, it's still nowhere near enough to meet large-scale demand orders. And so why is this? Why is farming not producing more native seed to meet demand? Well, first and foremost, farming native seed, just like any type of farming, is very different from state to state. And so farming in Florida is very different than farming in Pennsylvania, Iowa, or California even. It's also a rather new industry in the state that requires a great deal of knowledge and skill sets that are not easily obtained without support. And unfortunately, unlike many other crops in the state, there is virtually no support at the state level. And finally, younger generations, I might add, are at a much steeper disadvantage to get into this industry due to increasing land prices in the state and issues with financial support. And so what are the solutions? Well, to understand the solutions, it's worth first pointing out that other states or regions have been more successful than us at tackling these issues and growing the native seed supply. And this includes Texas, Iowa's, uh, Arizona, New Mexico, California, Nevada. Um, Also, the Institute of Applied Ecology has several regional partnerships that they've formed. And lastly, the national push for a native seed network and strategy. And so, what we've learned by talking with some of these groups is that the most successful native seed programs are the ones that support the entire native seed supply chain, so not just one aspect of it. And so just to run by two examples of highly successful programs, there's Texas is the first, and it's a nonprofit R&D program that operates out of Texas A&M's University's Kleinberg Wildlife Center. And it focuses on developing locally adapted native seed sources. And this includes providing foundation seed to farmers. And so that foundation seed is seed that is first collected from wild sources and then grown at a certain scale that can then be provided to a farmer to then grow at a much larger scale, which that is a critical component of these programs. They also helped in research with farming methods to make native species profitable to farm. They also have helped with direct seeding applications, seed storage work, as well as extension support for farmers. Um, they currently supply foundation seed to around a half a dozen companies, and they've played a central role in helping their Texas DOT transition to using native species along its roadsides. And this may be one of the largest native seed programs in the country at this point, and was formed in close partnership with their NRCS, their Texas DOT, the Lady Bird Johnson Wildflower Center, as well as other key strategic partners. And then Iowa. So Iowa's Tallgrass Prairie Center is another highly successful program dedicated to development of native plant materials. They focus very heavily on assisting county roadside managers, native seed companies, and farmers wishing to plant prairie for conservation purposes. And one of the things that they've been very successful at is providing, again, that foundation seed material. They've um, provided over 89 species as source material to seed companies and are still readily available today, which is quite remarkable. They also serve as an educational source to the public to provide the public with knowledge on why native plantings are important and these types of initiatives are important. Um, and so it's these two programs as well as others that we've tried to model the structure of the Florida Native Seed Partnership after. And from here, I'll turn it over to Stacy.
Thanks, Gage. So yeah, the creation of this program, this is where the foundation, the Florida Wildflower Foundation really comes in to facilitate this new program. This is about building something bigger than any one organization can do alone. So we are invested in seeing this through. So the vision for the Native Seed Partnership is clear. Gage, can you advance the slide? Thank you. So Florida's landscapes, both urban and natural, should be thriving with ecologically appropriate native plants. This is our vision. That means stronger biodiversity, survival of endangered and endemic species, more resilient ecosystems that can withstand climate change, invasives, and habitat loss. And our mission is equally practical to create and sustain a robust supply of affordable, Florida-grown, Florida-appropriate seed. And that seed will be produced by responsible, profitable industry that supports restoration and habitat enhancement and sustainable landscaping. So the partnership is about making sure that the seed supply is no longer the limiting factor for restoration and conservation in Florida. And to reach that vision, we've set 5 major goals. First is forming the partnership. That's bringing everyone to the table, all the stakeholders, all those who are necessary to make this work possible, and those who will benefit from its success. Then we need to strengthen it. We need to build the systems that will keep it functioning. We need to create the resources that are needed to educate and support those who are involved. And we need to build trust among all of the partners. We also need to drive the research so that we're basing decisions on science, not guesswork. As Gage mentioned, there's a lot of gaps in the knowledge that are preventing us from moving forward. So we need the science and we need the research to understand what we need to do. We also need to enhance the market. So giving farmers and producers a reliable path forward. And then eventually evolve this partnership because this is a living partnership. We want it to adapt as we learn and change as we learn new things and new possibilities. So here's how we've set this up. The Florida Wildflower Foundation, is taking a lead role in developing and promoting the partnership. So we are the connector, the convener, and the communicator. Our next step is to hire a partnership coordinator. This is someone whose full-time job will be to help build the ship and keep moving it forward. And we anticipate that happening in the next month or so. The University of Florida IFAS supports, well, they are the scientific backbone of this partnership. So they provide research, extension, teaching, and production of foundational seed. Then we need a steering committee. We need those agencies and NGOs and private sector partners to give strategic oversight and guidance to make sure that this partnership is working for them and meeting their needs. And then the Florida Wildflower Cooperative will play a supporting role, sharing equipment and resources, seed distribution channels to new and experienced farmers. So this is designed to be collaborative, with each piece playing to its strengths and supporting the other pieces. We also know that success depends on building knowledge. So that means launching a digital platform where resources are easy to find, where communication can happen, and just general support of this partnership. We also need to host regular partnership meetings to keep the momentum going and to make sure that we understand what the needs are of the partners and make sure we're aware of the issues. Offering IFAS certification for wildland harvesters will ensure ethical and effective collection of native seed from our wildlands. We also need to update the native seed production manual with the latest research and create a training program or a training pipeline for future seed farmers. So we're not just addressing today's needs, but setting up for tomorrow's solutions. Collaboration is at the heart of this effort. By working together, we can increase opportunities for seed procurement. We can expand the number of producers and farmers and the productivity that they're able to achieve. We can grow this market through smart, phased increases in production. And we can build stability by facilitating long-term contracts between our partners, our producers, our end users, and then ensure fairness and transparency through certification and equitable guidelines. So this is about building a system that works for growers, land managers, agencies, NGOs, and the environment. None of this will be possible without research. So some of our key priorities are improving efficiency and cost effectiveness of native seed production at scale, using genetic analysis and common garden studies to develop the guidelines needed for seed transfers that ensure the right seed is planted in the right place, establishing a conservation seed bank for sensitive and priority species, and then publishing those best management practices that land managers and growers can rely on. So research really gives us the foundation to do this work responsibly and sustainably. And we've built a 5-year roadmap to get us there. or to get us started, I should say. So in the first year, this is the foundation building and assessment. This is about getting the groundwork right, organizing the partnership, forming that steering committee, identifying stakeholders, and assessing current resources and capacity and gaps in our state's seed system. We already have a draft business plan and a draft strategic plan that we'll be refining with the help of the strategic committee once that is established. Year two is capacity building and research initiation. So once the foundation is set, we turn to strengthening our capacity. That means training seed farmers, creating those certification programs, and launching key research projects on seed transfer zones, production methods, and conservation needs. In the third year, we'll work on market development and advancing research. So by then, we're talking about scaling up. That includes developing markets for native seed, piloting contracts between producers and buyers, and advancing research to really refine those best practices and guide large-scale restoration. Year four is expansion and refinement. So with markets and systems in place, now we can shift toward growth, expanding production fields, increasing the number of growers that we support, and again, just continuing to refine our guidelines and our training and our distribution systems. Just as importantly, this is the stage two where we identify and fix the potential issues that have come up. So we're making adjustments so the system is resilient and workable for everybody involved. And then year five is our sustainability and legacy. This final phase ensures the work lasts beyond this initial push. So we want to put these structures in place for financial sustainability, for long-term governance, and for ongoing research. And most importantly, we're setting this up so the partnership and program will continue to function well beyond our direct participation, leaving Florida with a lasting, adaptable native seed system that will outlast all of us on this call today. So here's where we are today. As I mentioned, the Florida Wildflower Foundation is in the process of hiring a partnership coordinator. And we also have a web page set up, which we'll share with you at the end of this session. We're also working with the University of Florida on the ground cover restoration enhancement workshop. This will be held again at Austin Cary Forest on November 13th. This is the third year that this workshop has been offered in supporting this initiative. The day after that, November 14th, we'll have the first steering committee meeting of this native seed partnership. Foundational plots are being planted at UF's Plant Science Research and Education Unit, so that is already underway. And we are also working with public agencies on a pilot program to allow private companies to harvest native seed from public lands. And this will be a model that we would like to expand significantly in the future. So this is where you come in. The partnership can't succeed without broad participation. We need people willing to serve on the steering committee and the subcommittees that we eventually develop. We also need funding and resources to expand this work. We need seed collections to build our genetic foundation. We need researchers to help fill in knowledge gaps. And we need new production fields and harvesting programs. We also need your feedback, your wisdom, your experience, and your networks. This partnership will only be as strong as the people in it. So if you're here today, you already care about Florida's future. Joining this partnership means helping to build the seed system that will make that future possible. With that, I will turn it over to Dr. Andrew, who will address any questions everyone has.
Hi, everyone. So I asked you if you had any questions and to put them in the chat. I'm not seeing any in the chat, but if you have any questions or comments and want to raise your hand, I'll try to let you ask the question directly.
I have a question, Michael.
Okay, go ahead.
Thanks so much, Gage and Stacy, for putting this presentation together. I think a lot of us have been really excited about this initiative, and so it's nice to see where the progress is going, and it's nice to see a clear statement of exactly what this is about. So thanks for laying it all out. I was wondering, I'm looking at the needs here, and I'm just thinking about my own program and what me and my students are excited about, the research part of things. Can you all just give an idea of how you imagine University of Florida research labs interfacing with the partnership? Sorry, I know it's kind of a general question, but
Yeah, sure, I could take that one. So I think there's a multiple different ways in which the some research labs can interact with this partnership. The first and foremost, I think that's of critical need is understanding the transfer zones and guidelines and really nailing down how far we can take some of these species. It is hot debate when it comes to certain species in terms of how far you can take them throughout the state before they become not as um, viable ecologically. So that would be the first line. There's also, so there would be a number of different approaches we could use for that in terms of genomic research, common garden studies, and that sort of thing. The other big question, I think, and is something that is a pressing need for seed farmers, is more clear um, methods and reproducible farming techniques for some of the species that haven't been focused on yet. Even some of the species that are currently in production, there could be enhancement of farming methods. Um, and then I think the third big way would be helping with some of the processes that we're undergoing right now in terms of the certification for wildland harvesting. So um, we don't really have any firm research to rely on in terms of how much seed can be taken off of sites and before it becomes a potential issue. And obviously, this would cover a large number of species. Um, so yeah, I guess those are the three big ways.
Does that answer your question?
yeah, and also I just if you have any ideas for mechanisms, I mean, obviously the workshop has gone a long way to getting people together and talking, and so that's been useful for me and my students for our research programs. But as far as any, specific initiatives, anything like that?
One thing that it's been discussed is the formation of subcommittees underneath the steering committee. So it could easily be seen of having a research committee that sort of outlines the needs of the partnership. I think that might be how it ends up playing out.
How about you, Carrie? Do you have ideas on how you might, what things you might explore or want to explore?
Well, just about every paper I've written lately ends with, "Boy, we just really need seed transfer zones." So, I'm excited to hear about the the thrust. It definitely lines up with what I'm interested in researching, and then I'm glad to see a lot of nursery and practitioner people on this call because obviously, it's not going to be possible to put the work within a realistic and logistically feasibly implemented kind of scenario unless we're working with partners to design the research that way.
Are there any other research folks that would like to sort of chime in on some ideas they have or interests they have that they might see appropriate? Okay. Well, we have a question from Kaylee, and she asked, have vendors provided the option to premix bag compiled over leftover seeds if they aren't able to supply a certain amount for a certain seed? Does anybody got any thoughts on that one? Or Kaylee, do you want to expand upon your question?
I guess if I understand it correctly, it's asking Kaylee's asking if vendors have leftover seeds, and then are they able to then sort of compile that together into smaller mixes. And I think the bigger problem here is there is a lacking of seed overall. So that's like the big problem. And in terms of leftover seeds, I think, each company, I can't speak for them, but from what I can gather, definitely has leftover seed each year. It's just a matter of, does the amount fit the needs of certain clients and such, and then especially to the timing of the needs. So.
Kaylee, did that answer your question? Or does somebody else have thoughts?
Yeah, I do. Sorry, I was having Zoom issues, but um I'm good now.
All right.
Um that was a great presentation. I thought you guys really laid out everything really well. And I just wanted to say yes to research subcommittee for Amber and me at FWRI, and of course, to the research we've been talking about, but we have lots of interest in supporting on the research side, and that's something we can do directly.
Fantastic. Thank you, Johanna. I think, obviously with research, we're always going to have a need for funding and finding that funding support. And that's, again, coming together in this sort of partnership is going to allow us to be able to communicate that there is a need for this kind of research. And hopefully we can, share that need and express that need with some of the potential funding agencies, and they might be able to see that this is a place that they need to invest. So great. Kyla has asked a question. What species do you plan to start with? I imagine that's going to depend on the steering committee's sort of conversations, but does anybody have a thought on where we might start or how we might start or what gauge? I know we've started some things already.
Yeah, based on some of the conversations we've had with individual seed companies as well as groups, at least, and based on the success of other seed partnership programs, a lot of programs started with available material through NRCS. So we were able to secure um, some material, including Fakahatchee grass and Liatris. So these are unique genotypes that have been picked out for certain traits and such. And so we have began expanding that, and we're hoping to get all of that planted this fall and at least have some seed available for that next year. So, so we're well underway for that. Other species that folks have mentioned, but it just comes down to the ability to harvest and get enough material to start with, including partridge pea, which is very popular for wildlife, habitat improvement, food plots and such. Love grass, Coreopsis, and a handful of other Liatris species. So those would be some of the starting points, but I'm very interested to hear what other people.
Kyla, do you have some thoughts there you want to share?
I was just going to throw out as a follow-up. I know that you and I had talked and you shared the seed source wish list that you had. Is that something that you're going to share with other folks? Because I know everything's going to be going to seed here. So just looking to get you off on good feet to start.
Yeah, that's something we can definitely share with partners. And this includes some of the milkweed species that is very important for monarch populations and such, and some of the work that's ongoing throughout the state to support those monarch populations. So that's definitely something we can do. But we are interested in securing primary sources of materials and gaining access to sites. So anything that can be of help there, we would appreciate.
But again, I think a lot of that's going to come out from these, the steering committee and those subcommittees that'll form off that to help sort of make some decisions on how we prioritize, because one answer could be all of them. You know, we want to start everywhere, and we obviously can't do that. So we're going to have to prioritize. It's going to vary. You know, the needs are going to vary by location where you are, and what your potential demands are and what you're trying to achieve. So that's something I think that the steering committee is going to come together, and that's what we really need, all the voices from this partnership to help make some of those decisions and direct some of that activity. Does that answer your question, Kyla? Great. Looks like we had another question in the chat from Greg. So I'll ask it here, and then Greg, maybe if you want to follow up a little bit, you can. But are there criteria for what qualifies as restoration? Would a conservation easement required or a factor? I'm going to ask you maybe to expand upon that, Greg, if you wouldn't mind.
Hey, good afternoon, everyone. Yeah, sure. Because it's such a limited resource, I would hate to see this go to the highest bidder who wants to put native plants in their front yard. You know, when there are legitimate conservation needs out there, I would like to see, is there some sort of, you know, what would be required to be considered as restoration? Does that make sense?
So your concern is where the seed that gets collected, where it ends up. Is that sort of what your concern is, Greg? Am I interpreting that properly, or?
Yeah, pretty close. Yeah, because it's limited, you know, it should go to the highest and best use, not just the highest dollar. How do we categorize the need? This is true conservation, this is public education, still very important. Is there going to be some sort of, you know, factors that go into recipient sites?
Yeah, and I think that's one of those questions. Probably we don't have an answer today to say, but it's one that needs to be raised and a question that needs to be talked about and figured out. Some of that can happen. Hopefully, if people are attending the GRU workshop, we can have some of those conversations and begin to think about it there. But again, I think in this partnership, we're going to have to create forums where we can really begin to think about those kinds of questions, because it's an excellent question and one that we will have to address in some form. But I suspect we don't have a ready answer at this point in time.
I might just comment though real quick, Greg. I mean, I don't think if in terms, and I think you're really talking about wildland seed harvesting here and that proposed bid system that we're trying to establish. I don't know if it would be the case if someone in their yard or some other private landowner would really feasibly purchase hundreds of pounds of some seed or some species for their own yard. I think it's the bulwark of this will go to public lands and things like that have the ability to purchase it, right? Or have the ability to put it out. So if seed, because seed is currently so valued, I really wouldn't think it would get wasted either. So I would just make that comment.
And I just want to add too, and not to repeat what Michael said, but this is a matter for the steering committee. That's why we're trying to establish that early in this process so that we can think about these things. What are the needs that we need to look at, and the systems and processes that we need to develop so that we can ensure that the seed's going where it needs to go. So we need involvement from agencies and from other potential recipients to help guide that and figure out a fair system for distribution, but how do we prioritize those needs too?
Any follow-up, Greg, or thoughts?
No, I think I agree with everyone. It's an unknown, and we'll have to figure out as we go. I appreciate y'all's input.
Great. All right. Anybody else have thoughts on that before we move on?
I had a quick thought on it. Just think about it at FWC, we do a lot of prioritization of animals for funding and things like that. And the way that's done is like getting a bunch of experts together and having different categories with ranks. Like, is it endangered? Is it does it have big research gaps, that kind of thing. So it occurs to me you could have some kind of like ranking framework for what species get prioritized. Like, does it have direct importance to a certain animal, or like lots of potential for landscape use, that kind of thing.
Yeah, and this points out the need to have some policy people involved in this as well, and not just a bunch of biologists. That there'll be other aspects of this as we begin to get into it, and we'll need to make sure that we're, not missing out on important thoughts like in questions like this. So good. All right, we've got another question here from Jeff, and again, if I misstate this somehow, Jeff, please chime in and expand on it. You ask, how have other native seed partnerships dealt with, one, the price that end users are willing to pay, and two, funding of basic and applied research? All right.
I don't know if you want me to take that one, Stacy, but I guess I could just add that so the way the partnerships generally work is they don't necessarily act as a buyer of seed or anything like that. So that's up to the private market. So they're going to dictate the price ultimately to some degree. And so there's not as much leeway there, I think, for the at least to my knowledge, there's no partnership that I know of where they sort of dictate the price of seed. So that's ultimately just based on supply and demand principles. And then the second question for funding of basic research, there's a few different models that are out there. Most of them are based on some type of like participation. If you're participating in the partnership, there's some expectation of helping with costs for certain projects and such, research projects, that is. There's other models that could be simply based on funding that comes in through grants and through um, appropriations, and then also through um, donors and things like that. So there's ways that all of those partnerships have been successful in getting funds for research. It's just a matter of what works for Florida, because like Texas, we don't really have a lot of oil and gas industry here helping pay for some of those research projects. And like Iowa, we don't have a living trust fund to support it. So we have to basically come up with our own method.
Yeah, I saw that as one of the major barriers. Was when you get into basic research, you're talking six-figure figure, yeah, but you're talking very expensive research that it's needed. I was just concerned how it's going to get funded. I don't know if FPL was providing those kinds of dollars, or FIPR is providing those kind of dollars. I have concerns about trying to get federal funding given the current political climate, getting NSF or USDA funds where the big dollars are. It's great work if we can afford to do it. And then with the seed price, that's always been one of the barriers for the end users. They want the seed, but they're not willing to pay $200 or $300 a pound for seed. And those prices don't come down until you have a high quantity of seed. And I think that's one of the barriers for one of the for those getting into seed production, is they can produce the seed, but who's going to buy it? Especially with seed zones, and you're very limited on where you can sell it to. Someone in North Florida has a lot of seed, but they can only sell it in North Florida, for example. So it could be tough. Yeah.
Well, that's something too that the Wildflower Foundation has talked about exploring, is being kind of a guarantor for some of the seed purchasing, and we haven't fleshed this out, so I can't tell you exactly how it'll happen.
Okay.
But as a nonprofit, and we have a little bit of an altruistic goal too, right? But if we don't want that to be the hindrance to this working, so if there needs to be a guarantor to purchase seed, that might be something we can facilitate, and then we would also have the guidance on how to distribute that, or work with other partners to
That's
get
good. That'll help a lot.
And if it was easy, it'd already be done. That's just, we know this is going to be a tough task, and that's why no one group, no one entity is going to be able to do this alone. It's really going to take all of us, and identifying those barriers is certainly an important step along the road. Is saying, well, here's what we've seen in the past, and trying to find ways to overcome them. One of the things that's been interesting for me is sitting in on these meetings with these other seed partnerships and hearing how each one has a unique sort of situation and an approach to how they've gotten things funded and moved forward. And so I think we're going to have to find our own unique path. There is no good model out there that will absolutely transfer to Florida. But we can look at some of those and learn from them, and that's what we've been doing over this past year or so. And I think we'll continue to do that in this partnership and sharing that with everyone. So good thoughts.
Well, I was very encouraged to see all the successful seed partnerships. That was very encouraging outside of Texas and Iowa. Same in other parts of the country. That was very encouraging.
Yeah. All right. We got our first volunteer. FDOT has wildflower areas that can be used for research. Lance, you want to share more about that?
Yeah, thank you, Michael. And this is my first opportunity to be a part of um, the discussion today, and it's going to be my last as an FDOT employee. So I'm actually going to be pursuing an opportunity outside the Florida DOT. So my last day will be Friday the 19th. But I've got James Oliver, who's with me from the Office of Maintenance here, and we work together on the partnership with the Florida Wildflower Foundation. So they invited us, so thank you for the invite. And but yes, we do have large wildflower areas that we try to maintain. We've worked with Jeff on quite a bit of that in the past, but I just wanted to offer up that we can use those areas for research and be very involved with getting to a point that the researchers can come in and do what they need to do, but we can do our part. You know, we've got crews that do the work. We purchase the seed, so we might just need some biologist or some researcher to come in and do the study, and then we can cooperate with that if we just have that plan put into place. I think we can help with that as well. There's existing areas. I've talked to Stacy about the possibility of expanding it into rest areas. I really like to give the users of our roadways a chance to experience the wildflowers in a safer environment where it's more accessible. So rest areas is something that I'd like to see an expansion. There's some areas that are conducive for it, maybe some others that aren't. But even so, the expansion into rest areas could also be considered a potential spot for research, because you're not having to get out there and trying to slow down on a high speed facility or whatever. But you know, we can work through some of those details. But we're here to be a part of the partnership, and also to be a partner in funding where we can. You know, we have to follow the guidelines for how we spend our state funds, but we're definitely eager and willing partners to expand the use of native seeds as much as possible to help make sure that the areas we have will continue to be successful in the future.
That's great to hear, Lance. And we see some of the other successful native seed partnerships. Their DOTs have played important roles there. So really look forward to y'all's partnership. Hope your successor is up to speed on this, and we'll be able to sort of continue that commitment that you're talking about. So thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, Alex, I'm going to call on you just to ask your question yourself, because it's you got a long one here and I don't want to stumble through it. So, Alex.
Yeah, have other groups, you know, we've talked to Texas Native Seed about this, and it's something that they do, but have other groups or agencies expressed an interest to the partnership on contractually producing either single species or seed mixes? You know, it touches on Greg as a way to protect end users, to make sure that they're able to get their supply, but also from a production standpoint, protecting producers that, you know, if they produce 1,000 pounds of X species or X seed mix, that it's going to have a place to go while they're in the production process of it.
Okay, do you want to take that one?
Yeah, so I guess, I mean, there's definitely other partnerships that have worked on a contractual basis, like you're talking about, Alex. I think the Southwest partnership with Arizona and New Mexico, they were, I believe, doing that a little bit more heavily. And one of the things you have to be careful, right? Because um, the one of the goals of the partnership is to get foundation seed out to producers that can then grow it at scale and provide it to the private marketplace from the farm side of things. But if the partnership then is acting as a producer, it sort of messes up that market, and it sort of defeats the purpose of what we're trying to do, I think, is encourage that market. And the moment the partnership starts doing that, it may be disrupted. So again, I mean, well, there will be future discussions on this, I'm sure, with the steering committee and other folks, but that would be my initial reaction to that. But there's certainly a lot of interest in contract growing, and I believe some of the producers here today actually um, are doing that to some degree. Um, I think that there's a lot of challenges though, and there's a lot of risk out west. Um, there's I think a policy of indefinite demand, indefinite quantity. So that's something that we could look at modeling here, and it seems like it's been somewhat successful. But again, there will be challenges.
Okay, thank you.
Right. I'm sort of looking at the chat. I'm not seeing any more questions there. Does anybody else have any thoughts or comments or, feedback on how you see yourself engaging with this, or questions about how, if it's not clear, how you can engage and be part of the steering committee or part of the discussions?
I think we might have missed Victor's comment,
Okay,
Michael.
sorry, I missed it. Not see, Victor, okay. Okay, Victor, I'm sorry, I missed that. Could you expand on what type of genetic work you envision within this effort? Hypotheses, resulting actions. Wow. Anybody want to take a stab at that one? We've got some researchers here as well.
Well, I'm certainly not a genetics person. I don't come from that background. However, I do know that this work is very important to understand if there are underlying differences between populations. I think the other big thing that we can do with that is making sure that we're securing a solid population source from Florida. So making sure that, if we are um, producing species in a farm setting, that we're not somehow producing Frankenstein populations that then go on to hurt um, other populations in a restoration setting. So I think there are some key species where that's a concern. We've seen it with a number of species already in the industry, like beech dune flower, and we've seen it with sea oats and wiregrass, and there's still, quite a bit of debate, I think, with all of those. So having more further guidance on those as well as other things would be very helpful.
There has been work done in Coreopsis leavenworthii too with genetics that I was involved with statewide.
I often feel like when people ask that kind of question, they maybe have their own thoughts on that. So Victor, do you have some thoughts on what type of genetic work you might envision, and some of your thoughts on that you'd like to share?
Not in particular. I was curious mostly to figure out like if this was driven by, like Gage pointed out, commercially available stuff that's moving into the state that might be mixing, or is this from the perspective of trying to identify true diversity at the genetic level within the state and trying to appropriately match where some of this material might end up in the state with where it genetically seems to fit. So that's what my interest was on that aspect.
Yeah, and Victor, you bring up a great point about, the influx of seed sources coming from out of state. We see that with Coreopsis lavenworthii. Some of those populations being grown out of state have been, gone through multiple generations. So, more work on that would be, I think, critical. And I think it's also critical in helping us, set some of these certifications, in the sense of, having these species grown in the state, and supporting the Florida farmers, right? So,
And
One other
Cami,
point.
go ahead.
I think reciprocal transplant studies sometimes are a more economical way of looking at the genetics, rather than doing all the DNA work. I mean, it's just a faster way to get a possible solution or evaluate when you do the reciprocal transplant studies.
Cami, you had some thoughts you want to add to that? Saw in your chat.
I probably don't know enough to add to that. All I know is that whenever there's a conversation around this within our organization, people would sincerely like to understand what they should or should not do. And I mean, we're talking about people that don't have this kind of scientific background and really don't understand these issues. And we're inundated with so much misinformation. If you try to find it, there's some solid guidance from our university or the seed partnership would be really terrific.
Yeah, and Cami, what you're talking about is exactly what, one of the things that we do well at IFAS is we do the research, and we have a lot of folks that can handle various aspects of this research that's needed that we've already been discussing today, whether it's the genetics, whether it's the policy, some of just the basic how do we grow this thing to beginning to then extend that information and getting that out to the growers through our extension networks and whatnot. And so that's again, hopefully this partnership that we're building can really bring together these conversations, and we can identify these needs and begin to address these through our partnership efforts. So great stuff here. Well, we're getting close to the end here. Greg or Stacy, you want to wrap up anything based on what you've heard today and next steps and anything else?
I think the main thing is just to add that we have these links here. So please feel free to reach out to us with this email, and then also the GRU workshop sign up is available, and we'll be posting it more widely here this week. So be sure to have those on your calendar.
Great. Stacy?
Just please consider what you can contribute to the steering committee if you have the time and the interest to be a part of that. We really need support, and yeah, come to that first meeting following the GRU workshop. Help us get this on track.
All right. Well, I want to thank everybody for coming out today and engaging in this conversation, being part of it. And I look forward to seeing you at the GRU workshop and hopefully the conversation we have the following day. So thank you again, everybody.